So my name's Pete Thompson. I'm a running coach, a sports massage therapist, and also a speaker. And my aim is to help you to become a healthy, motivated, and successful runner. So today's video is all about how to run for a long time. And it isn't going to be one of those videos that just claims that there are kind of 2 or 3 magical steps to be able to run for further and for longer. Because ultimately, to be able to run for longer, you have to improve both physically and mentally. And it's difficult. It is not easy. And this video will hopefully provide some kind of clear steps, but also realistic steps in terms of how you can run longer and how that can benefit you. So the first tip is one that isn't really that rock and roll, but it's about having to build things up gradually. And unfortunately, if you want to run for longer, you have to take those steady steps to get there. Because yes, there are some people out there who might tell you stories that they've never really run before and they went and did a marathon. And, you know, brilliant. They may well have done that, but I imagine that they were probably in quite a lot of pain by the end. And also by doing that, they would have missed out on the journey to get there. So by kind of putting in that effort, by putting in that training over a period of weeks and months to get to that point, then you learn so much about yourself and you learn much more than you ever do just on that one race day. So I would say that, you know, for those people and for those experiences, they have missed out on that opportunity to learn something about themselves over a bigger period of time. So you do have to build things up gradually, and that is both mentally in terms of thinking, well, actually, I need to get to this stage. I'm currently running 10 miles and I now want to run 20 miles, or I'm running 2 miles and I want to run 10 miles. Mentally, you have to kind of get past that barrier of thinking, can I do this? And working out a way to kind of ease yourself into it. And then physically, you obviously have to be able to cope with being able to do that and to build your body up to allow it. So that first kind of tip is that yes, it has to be gradual and you need to kind of put in place those kind of building blocks and steps to get to that stage where you are running for a long time. The next tip is about taking a leap of faith. And I know I just mentioned about the fact that you have to build things up gradually, which I 100% stand by, but there will come a point where you have to take that leap of faith, where you have to do something that you don't know if you can. And I love that about running. I love how it gives you that opportunity to kind of stand on the start line of something and to not know what's going to happen. And that's incredibly exciting, and it's how you embrace that, because through all of your training, if you are building up to a particular race, inevitably you'll get to stages where you will probably have to run a longer distance than you have ever run before. And yes, that can be scary, but if you can embrace it, then it will really, really help with how your mind kind of both enjoys that experience or gets through that experience. So yeah, use that kind of idea that you are taking a risk and use it as a positive and take that leap of faith. If you just stay within your comfort zone, if you just stay to the distances that you know that you can do, you know, yes, you could try and improve on speed, but again, you are having to push your mind over something about whether you can or whether you can't do it. So if you can really kind of get through and embrace that barrier, then yeah, the possibilities are endless. The next tip about how to kind of run for a long time is to break it down. And, you know, for me, when I took on my challenges, I was stood at the start line, for example, of the Tour de France, and I had over 2,000 miles to go. Now, if I was starting to think about that logically, then my head would have just exploded. But what I tried to do was to break that down, you know, one into days, but even more than that, I was running maybe 50 kilometers a day, but I was breaking it down into 10-kilometer sections. So my mind was only ever focused on getting to that next 10-kilometer point. And for all of your long runs and enabling yourself to run for longer, you need to break that down. So again, whether you are currently running for a mile and you want to run for 3 miles, then you would need to break it down into different sections. And that could be physically stopping at certain points. So it may be that every mile of those 3 miles you stop, you break, you mentally start again, and then you continue. Or you just start again in your head. You get to that point and you think, okay, we're resetting and we're then going again to the next mile. So you are not focused on that end goal, you are focused on a short-term goal within that run. And that applies to if you obviously are doing more miles. If you're going out and you're training for marathons or half marathons, if you are having to run for 20 miles, if when you are stood and you're getting out that front door, if you're thinking I've got 20 miles to do, that can be incredibly daunting. Whereas if you think, okay, I'm going to break this down into 5 kilometres sections, or I'm going to break it down into 2-mile sections, then you can focus on, I just need to get to that next 2-mile marker, and you can break even that one down further. So you are working your way through the bigger picture without having to focus on that distance, because at the start it can be incredibly daunting to get going. So that would be another big tip, would be to kind of break things down and work out a way that you can break it down into smaller sections to get through those really long runs. So the next tip would be to incorporate races into your long runs. So this is something that I've done, and I know a lot of other runners do, is that they use races as a way to support their long runs and to make them easier ultimately. One of the simple ways you can do this is with a park run. So if you have your long run on a Saturday, for example, and you wanted to run 10 miles, you could do 7 miles beforehand, then you join into the park run and you finish with all that support of a kind of community element, of people cheering you on, of just having a different focus for that last 3 miles. What that will also do is give you a focus for the first 7 miles, because you'll know you're aiming to something, you're aiming to get to that park run to finish it off. So that is a really useful tool to be able to kind of incorporate that run. And it doesn't have to be a park run. You know, you could similarly, if you're training for a marathon, you could include a half marathon where you might do 4 miles before and a couple of miles afterwards. I always suggest that it's better to do the miles before, because I think then you go into the race and you know that end point is the end point, rather than getting to that end and thinking, well actually I know that I've got to do another 3 miles after that. If you can do those miles beforehand, you know that end of the race is that end of the race. So yeah, use other races to help with your long runs. And the next tip would be to just try and forget your limitations. We all place limitations on what we think we can do, and what we think we can do is normally based on our experience. So if we are someone who, you know, has only ever run for 5 miles in the past, our limitation will be 5 miles. The idea of running for 10 miles will probably seem ridiculous, and everybody feels that way. And I think if you can try and just kind of not limit yourself, just be open-minded about what you think you can achieve. And again, for me, you know, in terms of my running, when I first started and did my first half marathon, the idea of running a marathon seemed utterly ridiculous. I finished, I was in a lot of pain. I thought, how can anyone run a marathon? Over a period of time, I built up to be able to run a marathon, and then subsequently to be able to do multiple marathons. But that took time, you know, like I talked about earlier, about building things up gradually and taking those leaps of faith. But you have to be able to try and just not limit yourself, because that just opens up so many possibilities. It means that, you know, so many different options, races, distances are open to you. So try not to limit yourself and just kind of embrace what running can do for you. So the next tip is about distraction and the ability to distract yourself. Because if you are going out for a long run, the ability to be able to take your mind to a different place is going to be hugely beneficial. Sometimes you can be running in beautiful places with people that you're having lots of conversations and your mind is just elsewhere. And you will often find that those are the easiest ones that you will take on, because your mind is not focused on the internal, it's focused on the external. So anything you can do to make that possible. And like I just mentioned, if you can run in different places to distract yourself, if you can run with people, it is amazing how much difference running with people makes. It just means that you are kind of engaged in conversations, you've got the support of other people, and it will help you massively. But other tips that you can kind of incorporate, you know, there is music as a distraction, really important. You know, when I used to go out on long runs, I would sometimes take a tennis ball. I know that sounds stupid, but I would run along with a tennis ball and I could throw it up and catch it and throw it up and catch it. And that would be a way of distracting my mind. And I've also done that in music. You know, if you can put on that music, like I talked about in a previous video, at certain points to be able to distract yourself. So whatever it is, whether it's playing games in your head, whether it's going through quizzes, questions, thinking about other things in your head that will take your mind off how your body is feeling when you're really, really struggling. And, you know, that can be, again, not always focusing on your watch. If you are going out on your runs and you're always just doing this, and you're just kind of constantly looking at how long you've got to go, you will find it so much harder than if you can just almost put that watch to one side, whether you put that in a bag, whether you just are strong enough to not look at it for a period of time, maybe even take off the, the alerts for each mile, so you're kind of not really thinking about the miles, and then you will definitely, they will go quicker, a lot quicker, if you're not just constantly doing this. So yeah, not using your watch and using other forms of just kind of keeping your mind occupied. So yeah, that ability to distract yourself, hugely important. Find out what ways work for you to do that. So that kind of wraps things up for the video today, and hopefully there's been some ideas in there that will help you about thinking about how to run for a long time. And I think the biggest thing there is just to try and forget those limitations and embrace what running can offer you. If you want to subscribe to the channel, I'm going to be offering more kind of obviously weekly how-to videos. If you want to have a look on my website, PeteThompsonOnline.com, all the information there about coaching support that I can offer, sports massage, and also kind of my speaking services. So hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next week.